Welcome back.
Welcome back. I like to read. I'm a little bit tired today. Don't like to talk. I just like to reading a bit. So 4 p.m. soon. It's a grey and a dark day. So just eat big foods. So I will go to bed and read this.
Old Kingdom of Egypt. Old Kingdom of Egypt, Ancient Egyptian, c. 2686 BC c. 2181 BC. During the Old Kingdom of Egypt, circa 2700 BC circa 2200 BC, Egypt consisted of the Nile River region south to Abu, also known as Elephantine, as well as Sinai and the oases in the western desert, with Egyptian control /rule over Nubia reaching to the area south of the Third Cataract. 1. During the Old Kingdom of Egypt, circa 2700 BC circa 2200 BC, Egypt consisted of the Nile River region south to Abu, also known as Elephantine, as well as Sinai and the oases in the western desert, with Egyptian control /rule over Nubia reaching to the area south of the Third Cataract. 1. Capital Memphis. Common language Ancient Egyptian religion. Ancient Egyptian religion. In ancient Egyptian history, the Old Kingdom is the period spanning c. 2700–2200 BC. It is also known as the Age of Pyramids or the Age of the Pyramid Builders, as it encompasses the reigns of the great pyramid builders of the 4th dynasty, such as King Sneferu, who perfected the art of pyramid building, and the kings Khufu, Khafre and Menkaure, who constructed the pyramids at Giza. 3. Egypt attained its first sustained peak of civilization during the Old Kingdom, the first of 3 so-called kingdom periods, followed by the Middle Kingdom and New Kingdom, which mark the high points of civilization in the Lower Nile Valley. 4. The concept of an Old Kingdom as one of 3 golden ages was coined in 1845 by the German Egyptologist Baron von Bunsen, and its definition would evolve significantly throughout the 19th and the 20th centuries. 5. Not only was last king of the early dynastic period related to the first 2 kings of the Old Kingdom, but the capital, the royal residence, remained at Ineb-Hej, the ancient Egyptian name for Memphis. The basic justification for a separation between the 2 periods is the revolutionary change in architecture accompanied by the effects on Egyptian society and the economy of large-scale building projects. 4. The Old Kingdom is most commonly regarded as the period from the 3rd dynasty to the 6th dynasty, 2686–2181 BC. Information from the 4th to the 6th dynasties of Egypt is scarce, and historians regard the history of the era as literally written in stone and largely architectural in that it is through the monuments and their inscriptions that scholars have been able to construct a history. 3. Egyptologists also include the Memphite 7th and 8th dynasties in the Old Kingdom as a continuation of the administration centralized at Memphis. While the Old Kingdom was a period of internal security and prosperity, it was followed by a period of disunity and relative cultural decline referred to by Egyptologists as the First Intermediate Period. 6. During the Old Kingdom, the king of Egypt, not called the pharaoh until the New Kingdom, became a living god who ruled absolutely and could demand the services and wealth of his subjects. 7. Under King Djoser, the first king of the 3rd dynasty of the Old Kingdom, the royal capital of Egypt was moved to Memphis, where Djoser established his court. A new era of building was initiated at Saqqara under his reign. King Joseph's architect, Imhotep, is credited with the development. Government Divine Absolute Monarchy Pharaoh c. 2686 c. 2649 BC Joseph, 1st, c. 2184 c. 2181 BC Last king depends on scholar Nita Kurtisipta, 6th dynasty, or Neferkara, 7th/8th dynasty, history began. 2686 BC ended. 2181 BC population 2500 BC 1.6 million. 2. Succeeded by Eli dynastic period Ufgypt first intermediate period of building with stone and with the conception of the new architectural form. The step pyramid. 7. The Old Kingdom is best known for a large number of pyramids constructed at this time as burial places for Egypt's kings. History. Rise of the Old Kingdom. The first king of the Old Kingdom was Joseph, sometime between 2691 and 2625 BC, of the 3rd dynasty, ordered the construction of a pyramid, the Step Pyramid, in Memphis necropolis, Saqqara. An important person during the reign of Joseph was his vizier, Imhotep. It was in this era that formerly independent ancient Egyptian states became known as nomes, under the rule of the king. Former rulers were forced to assume the role of governors or otherwise work in tax collection. Egyptians in this era believe it king to be the incarnation of Horus, linking the human and spiritual worlds. Egyptian views on the nature of time during this period held that the universe worked in cycles, and the pharaoh on earth worked to ensure the stability of those cycles. They also perceived themselves as specially selected people. 8. The Pyramid of Joseph at Saqqara. The Pyramid of Joseph at Saqqara. The Temple of Joseph at Saqqara. The Temple of Joseph at Saqqara. The Head of a King, c. 2650-2600 BC, Brooklyn Museum. The earliest representations of Egyptian kings are on a small scale. From the 3rd dynasty, statues were made showing the ruler life size. This head wearing the crown of Upper Egypt is larger than human scale. 9. The Head of a King c. 2650-2600 BC Brooklyn Museum. The earliest representations of Egyptian kings are on a small scale. From 3rd dynasty statues were made showing the ruler life size. This head wearing the crown of Upper Egypt is larger than human scale. 9. Height of the Old Kingdom. The Great Sphinx of Giza in front of Great Pyramid of Giza. The Old Kingdom and its royal power reached a zenith under the 4th dynasty, 2613-2494 BC. King Sneferu, the first king of 4th dynasty, held territory from ancient Libya in the west to Sinai Peninsula in the east, to Nubia in the south. An Egyptian settlement was founded at Buhen in Nubia which endured for 200 years. 10. After Joseph, Sneferu was the next great pyramid builder. He commissioned the building of not one, but 3 pyramids. First is called the Myjum Pyramid, named for its location in Egypt. Sneferu abandoned it after the outside casing fell off of the pyramid. The Myjum Pyramid was the first to have an above-ground burial chamber. 11. Using more stones than any other pharaoh, he built the 3 pyramids, a now collapsed pyramid in Myjum, the Bent Pyramid at Dahshur, and the Red Pyramid, at North Dahshur. However, the full development of the pyramid style of building was reached not at Saqqara, but during the building of the Great Pyramids at Giza. 12. Sneferu was succeeded by his son, Khufu, 2589-2566 BC, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza. After Khufu's death, his sons Jedifre, 2566, 2558 BC, and Khafra, 2558-2532 BC, may have quarreled. The latter built the second pyramid and, in traditional thinking, the Great Sphinx of Giza. Recent re-examination of evidence has led Egyptologist Vasil Dobrov to propose that the Sphinx was built by Djedefre as a monument to his father Khufu. 13. Alternatively, the Sphinx has been proposed to be the work of Khafre and Khufu himself. There were military expeditions into Canaan and Nubia, with Egyptian influence reaching up the Nile into what is today Sudan. 14. The later kings of the 4th dynasty were Menkaure, 2532-2504 BC, who built the smallest of the three great pyramids in Giza, Shepseskaf, 2504-2498 BC, and, perhaps, Djedefre, 2498-2496 BC. Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid at Giza 5th dynasty. The 5th dynasty, 2494-2345 BC, began with Userkaf, 2494-2487 BC, and was marked by the growing importance of the cult of sun god Ra. Consequently, fewer efforts were devoted to the construction of pyramid complexes than during the 4th dynasty and more to the construction of sun temples in Abuza. Userkaf was succeeded by his son Sahur, 2487-2475 BC, who commanded an expedition to Punt. Sahur was in turn succeeded by Neferkarakai, 2475-2455 BC, who was Sahur's son. Neferkari introduced the praenomen in the royal titulary. He was followed by two short-lived kings, his son Neferefre, 2455-2453 BC, and Shepseskare, the latter of uncertain parentage. 15. Shepseskare may have been deposed by Neferefre's brother Neaserenai, 2445-2421 BC, a long-lived pharaoh who built extensively in Abuza and restarted royal activity in Giza. The last pharaohs of the dynasty were Menkaure Horkaiu, 2421-2414 BC, Shidkar Isai, 2414-2375 BC, and Unas, 2375-2345. The earliest ruler to have the pyramid texts inscribed in his pyramid. Egypt. Expanding interests in trade goods such as ebony, incense such as myrrh and frankincense, gold, copper, and other useful metals inspired the ancient Egyptians to build suitable ships for navigation of the open sea. They traded with Lebanon for cedar and traveled the length of the Red Sea to the kingdom of Punt, modern-day Eritrea, for ebony, ivory, and aromatic resins. 16. Shipbuilders of that era did not use speks, trinels, or metal fasteners, but relied on the rope to keep their ships assembled. Planks and the superstructure were tightly tied and bound together. This period also witnessed direct trade between Egypt and its Aegean neighbors and Anatolia. 17. The rulers of the dynasty sent expeditions to the stone quarries and gold mines of Nubia and the mines of Sinai. 18, 19, 20, 21. There are references and depictions of military campaigns in Nubia and Asia. 22, 23, 24. Decline into the first intermediate period. The 6th dynasty peaked during the reigns of Pepi I and Miran I with flourishing trade, several mining and quarrying expeditions and major military campaigns. Militarily, aggressive expansion into Nubia marked Pepi I's reign. 25, 26. At least 5 military expeditions were sent into Canaan. 27. There is evidence that Miran was not only active in Nubia like Pepi I but also sent officials to maintain Egyptian rule over Nubia from the northern border to the area south of the Third Cataract. 27. During the 6th dynasty, 2345-2181 BC, the power of the pharaoh gradually weakened in favor of powerful nomarchs, regional governors. These no longer belonged to the royal family and their charge became hereditary, thus creating local dynasties largely independent from the central authority of the pharaoh. However, Nile flood control was still the subject of very large works, including especially the canal to Lake Moeris around 2300 BC, which was likely also the source of water to the Giza pyramid complex centuries earlier. Internal disorders set in during the incredibly long reign of Pepi II, 2278-2184 BC, towards the end of the dynasty. His death, certainly well past that of his intended heirs, might have created succession struggles. The country slipped into civil wars mere decades after the close of Pepi II's reign. The final blow was the 22nd century BC drought in the region that resulted in a drastic drop in precipitation. For at least some years between 2200 and 2150 BC, this prevented the normal flooding of the Nile. 28. Whatever its cause, the collapse of the Old Kingdom was followed by decades of famine and strife. An important inscription on the tomb of Ankhtifi, a nomarch during the early First Intermediate period, describes the pitiful state of the country when famine stalked the land. Art. The most defining feature of ancient Egyptian art is its function, as that was the entire purpose of creation. Art was not made for enjoyment in the strictest sense, but rather served a role of some kind in Egyptian religion and ideology. 29. This fact manifests itself in the artistic style, even as it evolved over the dynasties. The three primary principles of that style, frontality, composite composition, and hierarchy scale, illustrated this quite well. 29. These characteristics, initiated in the early dynastic period, 30, and solidified during the Old Kingdom, persisted with some adaptability throughout the entirety of ancient Egyptian history as the foundation of its art. 31. False door from the tomb of Metyetri. Ca. 2353-2323 BC, Dynasty 5-6, Old Kingdom. Tomb of Metyetri at Saqqara. 32. Frontality. The first principle indicates that art was viewed directly from the front. One was meant to approach a piece as they would a living individual, for it was meant to be a place of manifestation. The act of interaction would bring forth the divine entity presented in the art. 29. It was therefore imperative that whoever was represented be as identifiable as possible. The guidelines developed in the Old Kingdom and the later grid system developed in the Middle Kingdom ensured that art was axial, symmetrical, proportional, and most importantly reproducible and therefore recognizable. 33. Composite composition. The second principle also contributes to the goal of identification. Multiple perspectives were used in order to ensure that the onlooker could determine precisely what they saw. 29. Though Egyptian art almost always includes descriptive text, literacy rates were not high, so the art gave another method for communicating the same information. One of the best examples of composite composition is the human form. In most two-dimensional relief, the head, legs, and feet are seen in profile, while the torso faces directly front. Another common example is an aerial view of a building or location. 29. The third principle, the hierarchy of scale, illustrates relative importance in society. The larger the figure, the more important the individual. The king is usually the largest, aside from deities. The similarity in size equated to similarity in position. However, this is not to say that physical differences weren't shown as well. Women, for example, are usually shown as smaller than men. Children retain adult features and proportions but are substantially smaller in size. 29. Aside from the three primary conventions, there are several characteristics that can help date a piece to a particular time frame. Proportions of the human figure are one of the most distinctive, as they vary between kingdoms. 33. Old Kingdom male figures have characteristically broad shoulders and a long torso, with obvious musculature.